You see, the most hypocritical leader presently is William Ruto. He spent a full year attacking the Russia-Africa summit, saying that Africa must be represented by the African Union in such meetings. Then he ended up at the marginal Italy-Africa summit and now Korea-Africa summit. Last year, President William Ruto complained about the mistreatment of African presidents during foreign trips. During the Mo Ibrahim Governance Weekend at the Kenya International Convention Center, President Ruto voiced his discontent regarding the treatment of African heads of state, citing instances where they were subjected to mistreatment. Ruto highlighted a specific incident where African presidents were purportedly made to travel in a bus to attend the funeral ceremony of Queen Elizabeth in the UK. He emphasized that it is unjust for African presidents to be treated poorly and that such mistreatment should not be tolerated. We attend these meetings with Africa US, Africa Europe, Africa Turkey, and now we are waiting for Africa Russia and Africa Japan. It's not sensible for all 54 of us to gather and stand before a single representative from another region. We're sometimes mistreated, herded onto buses like children, and this is completely unacceptable, President Ruto emphasized.
The decision that we have made as AU is that going forward, if there is going to be a discussion between Africa and any other country, we are going to be represented by the chair, the outgoing chair, the bureau.
Chair of the commission
and,
or the chair
and the chair of the Rex, and we have 5 Rex. That should be sufficient for, a meeting of maybe 6, 7. Yeah. That should be able to represent Africa. And that is the position I am taking as the President of Kenya. For any other meeting that we are going to have with all these requests, that we have a meeting between Africa and one other country. We respect the sovereignty of others. I think to ask for reciprocation is not to ask for too much. No. And for us to agree that let us have this kind of setup. The only, because I had a conversation with President Kagame and he actually led that particular position. I have had a conversation with Prime Minister Abiy. He believes very strongly that that should be the position of our continent. Because, as you have said, if we don't respect ourselves, nobody is going to respect us. And we should be able to take that kind of decision. And part of that respecting ourselves is when we say African problems, African solutions. We must be serious about the solutions. It cannot be rhetoric. It cannot be talk. It must be accompanied by what realistically and...
This man Ruto stands as a colossal political hoax in the recent history of Africa, operating as a neo-colonial puppet under the guise of a pan-African advocate, all the while furthering imperial interests across the continent. While this assertion may have been met with skepticism a year ago, today it is undeniably evident that Ruto is deeply entrenched in the imperial Western architecture, spearheading the advancement of Western interests in Africa. Ruto is not the first and certainly won't be the last. However, what makes Ruto particularly dangerous is his adept ability to cater to the sentiments of Pan-Africanism, causing many to fall for his deceptive behavior. Whether he is flattering Uganda's Museveni, holding hands with Rwanda's Kagame, or showcasing camaraderie with Eritrea's Isaias Afwerki, Ruto's ability to wear various masks and camouflages as a Pan-African figure is concerning. The attire of Ruto in Kaunda suits evokes reminiscence of Congo's Mobutu, who endeavored to camouflage his subordinate role by embracing Pan-Africanism through donning animal prints and rechristening Congo as Zaire to underscore African identity, despite his close affiliation with the U.S. Belgium. Much like Mobutu, William Ruto is perceived as a Western puppet, lacking the pretense. Who is the president that wears a Kaunda suit on visits to Djibouti or Uganda to convey a Pan-African image, but then adopts Western-style suits while in New York? How can we characterize someone who advocates for African leaders to abandon the dollar, seemingly in support of a Pan-African unified currency, one day, and the next day is involved in negotiations with the IMF and World Bank, the principal supporters of dollar domination? Last July, the president attended the Pan-African Parliament Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. During his speech, he fervently emphasized Africa's shared destiny and the need to liberate the continent from Western influence, which garnered a standing ovation from the audience. However, just a month later, he was advocating for the return of a Western-backed puppet president in Niger. During the same event, he strongly condemned the mistreatment of African leaders by European nations, demanding that they be accorded respect on the global stage. However, during a recent appearance at the UN General Assembly, he appeared to align with Zelensky, who had previously dismissed an African peace mission as a waste of his time. In a similar vein, although William Ruto showed solidarity with Ukraine against Russia and emphasized the importance of a rules-based order, he did not extend the same support to Niger, despite its struggles against French occupation. During the 5th mid-year AU meeting in July of the previous year, Ruto articulated that the Pan-African movement has always been about sovereignty and agency. However, recently at the UN General Assembly, he engaged in confidential discussions with U.S. leaders to finalize arrangements for the deployment of Kenyan soldiers, a move that would infringe upon Haiti's sovereignty and diminish its autonomy on behalf of the U.S. At the same AU event, he emphasized Pan-African transformation through self-reliance. Nevertheless, slightly over a month later, he proposed the outsourcing of Mombasa ports for grain imports from Ukraine instead of promoting domestic grain production in Kenya. The very same Ruto, who had previously expressed enthusiastic support for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, subsequently entered into the Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA, with the EU mere days later. This action directly violated the provisions of the AFCFTA agreement and could be seen as an act of subversion against it. In a similar display of hypocrisy and subversion, he attended the UN General Assembly and made the false claim that there is a shortage of food in East Africa. Meanwhile, it is known that he has been obstructing the import of surplus milk, eggs, bananas, and other produce from neighboring Uganda. In his engagement with the international community, William Ruto has been observed to exhibit a tendency to involve himself in African affairs on behalf of Western interests. Of particular concern is his propensity to represent Africa while doing so. Notably, within just a year of assuming the presidency in Kenya, and with relatively limited leadership experience compared to his regional counterparts, Ruto assumed the role of a peace mediator during a visit to Sudan in July. However, his overtures were met with skepticism by the Sudanese authorities, who saw through his intentions and consequently rebuffed his actions. Again last year, he interfered in West African affairs by positioning himself as a spokesperson for the African Union, AU, in a manner that undercut the efforts of Nigerians seeking independence from French imperialism. He advocated for the reinstatement of the deposed French puppet as president. His use of "we" in the AU raised questions regarding his authority to speak on behalf of others, especially considering he was the only African leader from a non-Francophone African country to make such a call. A few days ago, President Ruto made headlines during his state visit to the United States when it was reported that he spent a significant amount on renting a private jet. Soon after, images of President Ruto sitting in President Biden's seat at the revered Oval Office in the White House circulated widely online. A popular video captured the warm reception of President Ruto by President Biden, showing the two leaders exchanging handshakes and posing for photographs. President Biden confidently motioned for President Ruto to take a seat, extending a hospitable gesture by pulling out a chair for him. President Ruto, visibly excited by the moment, eagerly occupied the seat while President Biden stood behind him. In any case, what are your opinions on this matter? Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing our content, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below.